tonight we have two special guests, and I'd like to call on Dr. Niki Bould to make the introductions to our author this evening, Katherine Dewar.
Well, thank you very much. So yeah, I'm Niki Bould. I work for an environmental consultancy called Ahika, Katherine contacted me to see if I was interested in interviewing her for a feminist climate change book, so I'm pretty excited to be here. And Katherine, like myself, is from the north of England, so that we have a few commonalities. So I do feel quite privileged to be here with Katherine and get to ask her some questions about your first novel.
Kia ora, thank you, Niki. Kia ora koutou, ka nui te haere koa koe hiwi nei tātou. Hei tautoko nui ki tēnei rohe o te pōti. Hei tautoko nui ki mana whenua o tēnei rohe. Hei tautoko nui ki tēnei whare. Hei mihi nui ki a koutou. Thank you so much for coming this evening. It's a real pleasure to be here, and thank you so much, Niki, for taking a phone call from a random strange woman who rings you up and says, I've written a book, but Matilda says I should talk to you about talking to me about the books. That was a lovely first connection. And thank you to Michelle and Bronwyn at the University Bookshop who've been amazingly supportive about me saying, I'm coming down, can we do a thing? So it's great to be here. Thanks so much. I really appreciate it. Hi, everybody.
Okay, we'll get going. When I learned Katherine was coming down, I did what everyone does, I suppose, and jumped onto Google to see if I could find out a little bit more. So I was a bit more prepared. And there was a really good question on your website that I actually thought that I would pinch for tonight to start us off, which is really what makes Ruby and the Blue Sky a feminist novel?
Yeah, when it was first asked, that question was brilliant. I was on the way to visit my mum and dad, who live up in southwest Scotland. And me and one other young bloke who was a junior doctor had got on the bus, and it's a real rural bus, like the buses that go out here on the bridge. It's quite similar. And we talked a little bit about being a junior him being a big junior doctor and various things. He said, "Oh, what are you here for?" And I'd mentioned that I had a book, and then a lot of people then would just talk about anything else because they really don't want to know about the book. But he went, "So what's the book about?" And I said, "Oh, it's a feminist climate change thriller." And he talked about something else, and he went, "So what makes it feminist?" Which is, was a great way for so I wrote a blog. It was my first kind of post I've wrote about blog about what makes it feminist. But a lot of it for me is about it's about power. The whole book's about power, and at its heart, the biggest thing that makes it feminist, I think, is that it really explores that big tension that we have between the worldview of nature is there to be dominated and controlled and put down for our purposes, and it's so woven through our culture that man should have domination over nature, and the book actually has in its front piece two quotes which kind of sum up that. I said I chose the Bible because it's the one I'm most familiar with, but I could have chosen a book from either of the other Abrahamic religions, to be honest. Either of the other two would have similar quotes. So this is, God said to him, "Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it." And it goes on. And I've counteracted that with a quote from Björk. Really is a musician, and so there's a lot of musical references. And the quote is a Björk lyric: "I'm a fountain of blood in the shape of a girl." And that to me just sums up, actually, we're part of nature. We're mammals that are part in a bigger ecosystem. And so that clash of views and cultures to me is actually what's going on with us so much in the world at the moment, whether it's through climate change or other environmental devastation. I had lunch up at beautiful Taro Head today after we'd done the tour to see the albatross, and not seen any albatross actually because they're all just arriving. They've got 50 back, and then we got lunch and went outside, and 2 came in and circled overhead, which was just magical. It was beautiful. I opened up my little cardboard box for my lovely spinach lunch, and inside to eat my little spinach lunch was a plastic knife and fork. And of course, as part of the tour, you get to see all the plastic that the albatross are eating. So anyway, the woman who I took my rubbish back in to find the recycling, and I spoke to her about it, she was right. And it is that, we're harming nature in so many ways because we've not given it due regard.
why did you choose to write a novel about this, feminism, climate change, this?
Oh, it's kind of like the epic stuff, I guess. I'm attracted to big stories, and you can't really get much bigger than that for our culture, and it's affecting everybody wherever in the world you live. It's affecting us in some way, and also how that plays out in ordinary people's lives, and that responsibility we can choose to have or choose to ignore and turn away from to do something, or to just let the status quo prevail. And so that kind of combination of epic struggle and individual endeavour is just, when you want to tell stories, it seems a really, really rich place to be, really. So I was kind of drawn to that, and then Ruby kind of emerged from the ether the way characters do, and gets in your ear and doesn't shut up until you've written it down.
I was wondering if you could maybe read just a short section for us.
Yeah, I'd love to, if people are happy.
I think so.
Which was
it would be good around the flooding.
Oh, yeah.
I would like to dig into that a little bit more.
We can do that. She says, so you want to mark that bit. Yeah. So this is a bit that appears through a little bit of the way through the book. And Ruby's working with one of her collaborators. She's walking home at the end of working a late night together. We walked in silence, with him an arm's length away from me on the pavement. At the bridge, he paused. Sometimes at night, he said, looking down the river, past the armouries, this city can be lovely. They're in Leeds, which is where it's largely said. She's home, I said, stopping too, leaning over the painted parapet the way I have 100 times. I love the place, even when this river flooded and swallowed this end of town. I've never wanted to live anywhere else. It was the end of our Black Prince touring year, the Christmas before I turned 22. The rain hadn't stopped all month. While we were lolling among the presents and pudding, it got impatient. A month's rain came in a day. The river overflowed. By the 27th, Stella and I had run out of weed and got bored, so we ignored the warnings and trudged all the way into town in our wellies. We got as far as Swinegate before the streets were cordoned off. I remember the red and white tape flapping in the wind, and the water down Sovereign Street, all clogged with litter and choppy like Ullswater in the breeze. It was strange and terrible, and everywhere down there stank for weeks. Leeds wasn't hit the worst. Carlisle and York both suffered more. Some places became islands, whole villages cut off. I shivered when we pressed on.
Now, I know that you wrote this way before Leeds woke up on Boxing Day 2015 to some of the worst flooding that the city had ever seen. So how does it make you feel when your book is becoming a reality?
Yeah, it was really freaky. So I'd written that part like two years prior. So I'd written it sort of during like late 13, early 14, and it survived all the way through the different drafts. And you know, you sort of see the news from Britain come through when Leeds had flooded. But I'd based the account on historical floods, but they hadn't happened for quite a long time, and so I kind of got a sense of where it done. I'd used the old records and kind of worked it out and written it. And so the mixture was a thing of like, because I was writing final edits by December last, virtually into January, I was in final edits kind of getting it together. So the response is kind of a mix of like, well, obviously horror that it's happened to people you know in the city that you know, and that it is definitely a kind of a weird thing when you write something and then it plays out. And then I kind of like, I'm going to have to rewrite it, how am I going to affect my draft? I had like people proofreading it, I wasn't really expecting to have to change a section. So I sort of took a deep breath and let it sit for a couple of weeks, and then went into that part of the manuscript, and actually I just needed to tweak 2 sentences. Otherwise what you heard, which is the final version, is pretty much how I'd written it. So I shifted where the flood went to, a block, because it didn't actually quite go as, I'd written it a little bit further than it actually went, and I put the date, made the time specific, so the bits about the Christmas reference, I haven't made it then, I've made it a generic time. So it actually, it wasn't a big shift to do it at all. But one thing that's happened since, which has been really nice, in terms of connecting me back into that city where I lived for 9 years, has been that the council and one of their museums are doing a museum exhibition of the year after the flood to allow the community to express their responses to what happened and to tell their stories of how they were impacted. So they're going to feature Review the Blue Sky with a little bit of like the before and after text to kind of talk about a creative response to that community and part of it, which was, so she's going to get in a glass case apparently. She feels very grown up. But it's a nice way to kind of connect that back in, and I kind of think, you know, weaving a climate change account into that flood is an important thing to do, and the curator is really, you know, really keen that there's that aspect of it as well. So yeah, it's really good.
I found myself quite emotional when I was asking that question, because I'm from Leeds, and I think for my parents, it was one of the first times that they really acknowledged that the things that I've been harping on to them about are actually starting to happen, and their city and their friends and people around them were all, their homes, their shops were all devastated by something that I've been saying, well, the climate's changing, it's not going to be for the best. So.
And it's really hard, isn't it? Because we experience, I mean, you know, I just want to acknowledge this after Dunedin floods, which were huge down here, and, you know, I've not been here until now, so I haven't seen them, but I've read quite a lot about them and how devastating some of our most vulnerable communities were affected by it. And I know that it's a controversial topic in terms of if the stormwater drains had been better maintained, maybe that flood wouldn't have been so bad. But when we've got cities that are built below sea level, or cities that are built in, you know, where big rivers go through and are used to historically having a floodplain, and now we have that as where people live or where they run shops, we're going to be hitting that more and more, because those 1 in 50, 1 in 100 year events are going to be happening more severely and happening more often. And it's interesting actually, because I did first talk about the book in Leeds when I launched it, and of course that flood was, you know, very much clear and present for people still. And then the first event I did for it back in New Zealand was as part of the Whanganui Winterfest. And I hadn't actually really twigged until I'd gone to Whanganui and saw the historical plaque on the wall, which shows their biggest ever flood record in early 1900s. And then from like 2 years ago, the written on the bridge, how much higher that flood had come. And so there's kind of like a recurring theme to flooded communities. That, apart from Titirangi, which is my Auckland event, which was kind of like, well, it's like 500 metres up, so that one was all right. Yeah, it's a slightly, it's a disturbing aspect. Really something we are all going to have to get used to, and how it affects us more. And the more change we can make now, the less badly people will be affected next time they happen over time. You know.
So how much research did you put in, like we've just heard about, you know, you've obviously went to libraries and learned a lot about the floods to write about that. How much other kind of research did you put in to the book to kind of draw in?
Yeah, real mixed. A mix really. So, I mean, I lived in Leeds for 9 years. It's where Tony and I met. So so there's some of it where you just know the city, and then where, you know, like a tourist map will help you make sure that the streets are in the right place. The internet is fantastic, you know, like there's a scene in the book that I wanted it to be taking part a certain degree out from the city centre where there's a smallish river, like a tributary to the Aire, which is the main river, and I didn't know a place, but with a combination of Google Maps and Google Earth, I could not only find the place, but see what the little stone bridge looked like from photographs that people had posted, you know. It's phenomenal to be able to do that. And then the amount of scientific information you can access, so I know too much about polar bear diseases that I really should know. I won't say any more about, but it's, yeah, because you can access, it's a phenomenal tool as a writer. You can become an expert in anything if you can prepare to put enough time in it, because you can find the information and find the data. And, you know, obviously talking to people, and because I've got friends and family up in the UK and I've got really close friends in Leeds still, I go regularly, so things like keeping your ear in for how the city sounds, it really does help to be there. You can do a certain amount remotely, but yeah, it's good to have your feet on the anywhere as well. So.
Yeah. Well, talking about Leeds, Ruby's band is called the Carnival of Owls, and you give a delightful description of how that name comes to be in the book. I was wondering if you could just read that out for us, seeing as we're just talking about my home city.
I'll have to. So Ruby's talking about one of the music shops that she frequents. The Owls aren't Northern Guitar's only celebrity clients. There's the Kaiser Chiefs and the music, and Kalash and Hayley Gafternick. Even Andrew Eldritch still hangs out at Northern from time to time, fingering the merchandise. I am, however, their biggest famous customer right now, anyway. It's also true that putting two of the city's icons in your band name makes everyone think they own a slice of you, regardless of whether they like your tunes. The Chapeltown Carnival has been shaking its stuff down the road from us every year, since before Mum was born. Grandad used to take her when she was a kid, and for years the three of us went. Mum reckons the first time they took me, when I was a baby, Dad came too, before he buggered off. As for the owls, well, just look up next time you're in Leeds and you'll see them peering down from roofs and doorways, plinths and podiums all over the place. Mum and I used to make up stories about how they escaped the coat of arms and went on the rampage.
And spent a lot of my teenage years wandering around Leeds. I knew that the owls were on the coat of arms, but I really hadn't realised how much they featured. So as soon as I read that, I again did another Google search. I was like, really? Is this really true? And honestly, it's incredible to find out how often the cheeky little crowned owls, because on the coat of arms they have crowns, and they're just all over the show in Leeds. And I was blown away by that, and I just thought, gosh, you must be an incredibly observational person to have noticed these little tiny details in a massive city, and you've seen these things and then you've woven them through your novel. And I was just wondering if you could expand a little bit more on some of those little realities.
I think so. I think I'm insanely curious, like I'm really nosy, like, you know, Bill's one of my lovely clients for those, because I ask endless questions and we're starting to work with the companies. It's like you really, really want to get under the hood and understand what makes things tick. And anything is an assembly of lots of details, so the more you can think of. But and the last place Tony and I lived in Leeds was a old building called Gledhow Hall, and we had a little flat in it. It was all broken up into flats. And but it had it was Georgian originally. It was really old. I can't remember what year that would be. 1640s.
1640s.
Yeah, 1640s. Thank you. And so some of the features in the building were really old. And our little flat up on like the second floor had an entrance hall that you went into, which would have been like a sort of an entrance to a part of the chambers, and it had a stained glass ceiling. It like set in, which was the crest of Leeds, and like the glass was so old that it kind of slumped, it kind of goes thick and runs, but it was the crest of Leeds. So the owls were there, so I'd kind of seen them really up close in a way you wouldn't normally. And then I was like, oh, the owls are in the crest, and then I would have noticed them, I think, outside one of the other buildings, and then kind of got the bug with it. But you can actually do an owl trail around Leeds. There's a leaflet and a map, and you can go and check them. And when I did a little social media competition when I was first launching the book, and put up a couple of photos of locations in the book. And the one I thought I wasn't sure people would get was the big new shopping arcade, the Trinity Arcade, which also does feature in that. Right up high, I was delighted to see, on a podium, like nestled in, is a little owl, and they've put a new little owl in right up there. So I had taken a photo of it, and the time before when I've been in Leeds as part of the location, I put that up, and straight away, actually a lady who's a Green Party member up there, I got it in the Trinity Arcade. So it's this whole owl spotting thing. So yeah, thank you. I'm glad you like them.
Yeah, I did.
And owls, of course, from a symbolism point of view, are wisdom, and then Minerva and their female wisdom. So there's a thing to it too.
Yeah, I thought it was lovely because the Meridian Centre is somewhere I had spent a lot of my teenage years. My dad had worked up there, so I'd gone through the Meridian Centre, and there's an owl that had originally been put in there to scare off all the little sparrows and things for coming in and making nests around. But then they'd covered the whole thing in, so actually no birds could really get in there, but they didn't take the owl away. They decided to leave the owl in there. So yeah, it was pretty fascinating. So the other thing your little reading there really highlighted something else that I was really curious about, which is the relationship between the mother and daughter, and the lack of relationship between father and daughter. And I was just wondering again, there's a good description I think you've got in the book that really highlights the relationship between mum and daughter, and I'd just like you to read that for me.
Yeah, so as you get, Ruby's mum raised Ruby as a single mum, and a huge total to tell her parents out there, because it's bleeding hard. I've never been brave enough to have kids, but it's bleeding hard work. I know from people who've done it. And so this is part way through, and Ruby's gone up to visit her mum. I chained my bike at my mum's front door, and she came to greet me. She was wearing lippy, which she never wore at home unless we were celebrating. I could feel the excitement in her hug, the news bubbling to get out. She insisted I wait till we were at the kitchen table, a Chardonnay poured for me to match the one she was halfway through. I quit, she said. Mum doesn't surprise me often. When there's just the two of you, you learn each other's warning signs pretty well. But you love your job. Loved, she said, pouring herself more wine to ensure her conviction was well enough oiled to run smoothly in the face of my scrutiny. Something had happened while I'd been looking away, my attention caught between the group and my band. Mum has been the school gardens coordinator since I was 2, and the council created the role just 1 day a week. By the time I started school myself, it had grown to full time. Whenever kids visited a school for a match or a competition, and Mum had been at work, they returned wanting beanstalks and black Nero cabbages of their own. At the start, I would hide when she came to Chapel A Primary. Already too tall, too pale and too ginger, I did not need another stigma. But after a few weeks, I learned the other kids thought Mum was cool. They clustered round her to see caterpillars or the first potatoes, to learn how to mulch lettuces and string up peas. I thought they got overexcited by things that I'd known forever, but I didn't hide anymore. She got up to stir the risotto while she told me, as if doing ordinary things would make the words more normal. It's been coming a while, she said, but I've been more persistent lately. It brought things to a head. In the end, she said, settling the lid on the pan and coming back to the table, I had to promise to only plant where they said, or leave. So I left. She shrugged and tipped back on her chair, emptying her glass like she was the rock star. I wasn't sure if I was proud or worried, so I poured us both more wine. She told me how when the PE teacher saw she had planted tomato canes behind the goal net, she was sure he would have a heart attack. The risotto burned. We didn't care. We were talking power and freedom, rulers and rebellion, Aung San Suu Kyi and Naomi Klein. By the second bottle, my pride and worry had become compatible. So you can tell where Ruby gets it from.
So I'm curious about the relationship there and how that kind of came to be. Is it a reflection of your own family, or is it just a creation that you just thought was important?
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, my dad's amazing and is a really important part of my life, and I have both parents still together, which is, really, really special, and they, worked hard to make sure that happened, and he's, been a massive influence in my life. I think there's a number of things, this stuff isn't necessarily always a conscious decision. Sometimes it's kind of the way it evolves. And I think there was such an important part about that mother-daughter relationship that as it was being written, there just wasn't really space for anybody else. Like, that was so strong and so intense in the way it kind of came to fruition. And so when it did get to the stage of putting the logic side in, because when I'm not one of these really organised writers, I'm full of admiration for people who can plot something out from beginning to end and then in their heads and then write it. But it doesn't happen like that for me. It's just snippets and it's bits, and a lot of it will come really organically. And then I just step back and go, where's the story? And kind of kick it around until it starts to look like it'll be a story. And then start the really detailed work of actually stitching it together to be something that people will want to read. And so during that logic stitch it together bit, I was like, well, there's some key people who come through around it, but there wasn't a dad. And at that point it was like, okay, so what happened? Where's he? And that was where that went. So yeah, just this. And I think life isn't about kind of like tidy, straight people who live in conventional family units. We're human beings, and this book has wanted to reflect people as I experience them. The glorious messiness.
So it brings me on to something that I think ties you and I together a little bit. We all know that long distance travel is pretty horrendous for climate change and contributing to greenhouse gases. And Ruby even opts not to fly to an important event for this very reason, making a statement about it. And myself, born in West Yorkshire, and yourself in North Yorkshire. We've left our families behind, and both of us have been here, I think, for over 15 years.
Yeah, we've just been 20 years this year.
Yeah. So how do you feel about living here and visiting, or having your family come to visit you when it's doing something that's completely against what you believe in?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a big conflict, isn't it? And I think that, I mean, we emigrated in '96 when climate change was kind of on the radar if you're really, really into it, but it wasn't really on our radar. And we certainly didn't think through the consequences of that. But, you know, we're both really close with our families, and we do like to go back when we can. So I kind of try and do every sort of 18 months to 2 years, especially as parents are getting older, and we've got all four, so you want to make the most of that time together. So I think the answer from me is just be really, really conscious of the footprint, whatever we do, and try and minimise it, try and make the most of it. So try and just go for longer trips when we go. When I'm up there, use the train, not try to get into that habit of doing the short flights. And even domestically, because the worst thing about flying generally is the going up and the going down, is when you burn most fuel. So like coming down here, I had the opportunity to come down, I was invited down for a wedding. Had a very dear friend who's been living down here for 3 years now, and I haven't been to visit. So it's an excuse to make the trip a little bit longer. Now try and take a holiday, so have a holiday around that. And to then go, right, well, I'm going to do a book thing, and can I do some work with some amazing, I've got 2 amazing clients down here, so that we make the most of that time. And so I think whether it's visiting family or doing that, it's not travelling on it, not using it lightly and realising it's a privilege. There's an amazing guy called Hamish Reid, who runs a climate-focused organisation called Project Lightfoot that you may know. He works with sports organisations to get them to drop their footprint. And he said sometimes you have to do it, you have to do the travel, but also bear in mind it's not just about offsetting the carbon, it's actually about your handprint and what work you do in your advocacy and in your volunteering and in your own life, and how you influence what other people do. So yeah, the irony of flying anywhere to talk about a book that deals with climate fiction is not lost. However, I will say that one thing that was a real help is the fact that we can now do print on demand. So this book, if when we got the supplies organised for University Bookshop, the batch of 20 that's the original stock is printed for that specific purpose and sent directly if it's going to be used, sent from Australia in that case. So there's not a couple of thousand copies wasted that might end up being trashed somewhere, and it's available as an ebook. The copies that get used in the UK can get ordered up there, and the similar in the States, so that it's minimising the shipping. So you kind of just trying to make those decisions all the time when we can, because the system's pretty broken, and so if we can keep functioning.
So I'm really fascinated in Ruby and how, as an author, you create this incredible woman who's, she's my hero. She's incredible. And I just really would love to know how you get inspired to create someone like this. Would you like to
tell me
a little bit?
It's always kind of like hard afterwards to kind of go, where did it come from? And I think so. There were a variety of things, and there's one is like, it's getting better on TV all the time, but in literature actually, and in films, if we have heroic women, they're quite often heroic within the domestic sphere, and that's really important. But I know women who are heroic on a national and international sphere, so I kind of wanted to explore what the formation of one of those might be like in the early stages, and also at the same time surrounded by amazing young people who are incredibly passionate and articulate and talented and reaching out with it. Whether it's Greta, who's an amazing movie maker, and if you get the opportunity to watch Out New Zealand when it comes out next year, watch the trailer, it's phenomenal. And they're not prevented by doing things, because we've got the ability to tell their story to thousands of people in seconds for free online that we've never had in human nature before. And also Ruben Winter, who's a young musician I've known for a really long time, and his electronica act Totems gets a name check in the book, who's been making music and performing it and curating it and putting it out online since he was really, really young. Young climate change activists, a lot of the crew are in Gen Zero, who are just doing this stuff, and they're changing the world. They're not waiting for permission or curation by a big organisation. So they were inspiring in terms of the way Ruby reaches out through her music initially in the novel, but also for me in terms of, you know, if I'm not going to sit around and wait for a big publisher to decide that there is a global market for feminist climate change fiction, although I'm quite keen to prove that there is. I'm not going to sit around and wait to find out whether they think there is or not. We're just going to make it happen and start to do it. And so, you know, that confidence to use the technology to create change was a big part of it, I guess.
So are you musical yourself? Is that how you could weave that?
Love music. Like, grew up with my mum sung in choirs like all my life. My sister took her music studies really seriously. I would sooner skive off and practice on the piano and go and read a book, to be honest. So I didn't used to practice, and I don't have a particularly strong natural singing voice. Although I love singing, I love Waiata, and I love that, you know, love that opportunity to connect. But when I kind of got into music when I was sort of 15, 16, I never stopped listening to it, and I love hearing music. It really inspires me, and so. And I've been to a lot of live music performances, and so I guess that adding that empathy and curiosity into going, okay, so what would it be like to be on the other side of the microphone, kind of allowed you to do that stuff. I think that from talking to musicians and people in other creative disciplines, the creative process is quite similar. So she writes music in the book, and she's written some lyrics that are in the book, you know. So it's that side.
Yeah.
I think there's a natural connection there.
Yeah. Is there a little bit of a connection as well between you and her in the sense of the beginning of the book, she's a musician and not really an activist, and her mum obviously is very connected to the earth, and she kind of takes on this activist role, kind of, although it's always, you know, she's obviously already known lots of the stuff, but she's never really stood up for it. Does that reflect strength you mentioned earlier about coming over here that maybe you didn't really think too much about climate change, and maybe you weren't much of an activist when you came here, but would you say you're an activist now? Or?
Oh yeah, but yeah, I have been, but for a long time. Like, I mean, one of the things that influenced me wanting to enter Aotearoa was the nuclear-free position here, and I grew up like in a household that took the natural world really seriously, both from a caring for it point of view and from a scientific perspective, from my mum and my dad's backgrounds. Thanks. We didn't have a cockerel though, we had a cockerel and titterati, which was quite entertaining. And noisy, you can hear it on the video. It wasn't quite in the library, but he was trying. And so I think, and I remember, I've got a Greenpeace t-shirt I had from like I was 12, and I remember being absolutely at the Green and Common winning on the TV screen when I was, young, going, can we go, Mum? We didn't, but we could have done, I probably could have pushed a bit further and maybe could have. And so I think I've had that all the way through, but I think what I'm really interested in is what are the points where we get off the conveyor belt, where we don't just do the expected job and the follow through what would just the normal thing to do, and where we get sometimes those junctions where we kind of get asked to step up, and whether we do or not. And it's hard, it's hard for people to actually keep a roof over their head. They need to be working 3 jobs, they're not getting paid properly, and they can't keep themselves healthy, let alone do stuff. It's hard to kind of take a stand and do that kind of thing. So in fiction we can explore this stuff with more freedom. We're not kind of constrained by people's realities and hardships. We can take that creative leap.
Yeah.
Did I answer it? I don't know.
You did answer the question. It kind of leads me into another one, which is really about that inspiration, because she's all around inspiring people to make change. And I'm just wondering, I know you just said that there's, we're all very busy in our daily lives. Time seems to be something that has been reduced significantly for some reason for all of us. And I was just wondering if you think that people do actually need to be inspired to make a change, rather than it just kind of, we need that inspiration, we need that figurehead.
It really, I don't know that it necessarily needs to be a figurehead, but a whole range of things can inspire us. Going out into the amazing abundance and beauty of nature can be really inspiring to us. And having a conversation with someone else can be really inspiring. So I think it can be a whole combination of things. But what I do think is true is that beating people with statistics doesn't really motivate them to change. And I think that in terms of climate advocacy, we've got a long way to go in actually successfully motivating people to be able to act and deal with it, because at the moment, even as the predictions get worse, I'm finding myself wanting to turn away from stuff at an emotional level, because there's only so much the end is nigh that we can deal with before we kind of want to climb under the duvet and stay there. To be blunt, I mean, I have a couple of days most years where I'm like, I just can't do this anymore, and But we need each other to inspire ourselves to do that change, and we need to take all the inspiration we can from nature, and we need to believe that we can make a difference, because we can. Get on and do it, and every small thing can add up. So, it's big, and I think for climate change in particular, it's really difficult because, we haven't been good at communicating it very well at all. I mean, even the simple metaphor of the greenhouse gases forming a blanket that's getting ever thicker around the planet, we don't use that nearly enough, so it's very hard. How can people visualise a ton of anything, and especially when it's a gas? It's kind of like, and so we're kind of then reduced to using analogies like how much energy does it take to do this versus that, and how much is the climate footprint of this, but even those things are quite nebulous, so I think we've got a long way to go in actually trying to make those things feel tangible, and then for people being able to translate that through into action. So. Yeah, right. And there's a big role for art to play in this, I mean, there's an emerging genre. Has anybody in the room heard the term cli-fi before? Yeah, so there's a few, but it's at an early stage, and it's been being used for maybe it's going up to about 8 years now, I think, and it's a way of kind of saying that climate fiction is starting to become, cli-fi kind of fiction, starting to become a body of work itself. At the moment, a lot of it is assumes we fail. It's post-dystopian and assumes that it all goes horribly wrong. And the acknowledgement to Philip Temple, actually, who's not here. He's overseas, or he would have liked to come. So Dunedin Oct, who wrote, which I think is New Zealand's first climate change novel, which is post-climate change, called My Story, and is a rollicking adventure story about political activism, but not particularly targeting the climate, because the climate's fairly stuffed by then when it happens. So maybe this is New Zealand's first climate change activism novel, and second sci-fi novel. So it's important that art plays a role as well, I think.
Yeah. So talking of inspiration, when countries such as Germany have just passed a bipartisan resolution calling for a ban on sales of new vehicles powered by internal combustion engines, which includes gasoline and diesel. How's that making you feel?
Well, kind of actually a bit like we're not there yet. So what they've passed, and it's an important step, but they've basically said that they think the European Union should outlaw these things. They'd like it to happen by 2030. So this is set in 2021, which is like 5 years in the future. So 2030 is still another 9 years forward, and that's before the ban that Germany would like to see might happen. Right, and if Germany really wanted to, they could just ban German car manufacturers doing diesel engines. In fact, with their record on pollution measurement, it might have been the least they could do recently. So it's a good thing, but it's just too little, it's just too late, it's just too dependent on other people doing things. And it's brilliant that the climate accord has been signed. But of course, if you look at New Zealand's, we signed it, and we're part of that first wave to sign it, and that means we get to get around the negotiation table. And that's a really terrible thing, actually, because New Zealand around that negotiation table will be trying really hard to water it down, to use less high quality carbon credits like the terrible ones we bought from Eastern Europe, and to allow old plantation forests to be counted that were actually planted before. So, we're going to be advocating really hard for a dumbed-down climate solution, and we should be ashamed of that with our history and our record. And from a marketing perspective, I run a marketing business, good sense is my day job. It's a devastation thing to happen from our brand, because that won't stay secret, that will come out, that we're trying to take things backwards. It's such an opportunity to be leaders and do something positive.
I think I all need to read climate change activism novel to inspire them to actually take a stance
and do something.
Well, I'm going to have one more light question for you before we'll wrap up, and you can open questions up into the audience. But I love the front cover of your book, and I just think it's really clever, ruby and blue, and it's it's Leeds, it's the city, and I just wondered, How did this occur? Because you don't just come up with something like that, or do you?
No, I don't do pictures.
And it wasn't your... No, it wasn't.
I do words.
Yeah.
So yeah, the title came quite early actually. I really like the title, and so there's a whole process about deciding, am I going to go down the route of conventional publication submissions, or am I going to self-publish? And so I spent a lot of time last summer researching how doable is the self-publication, can I do it? And actually, having had 25 years in marketing where I've organised a lot of material and digital stuff, I kind of figured that with some amazing help from people who read it and edited it and helped me proofread it, who had good professional skills that they could bring to the table to do that, that the bit I couldn't do was the design. So I commissioned an amazing cover designer called Kiwi O'Shaughnessy, who's an Auckland-based New Zealand cover designer. It's her specialist work, and I commissioned her to do it. So I said, would you be interested? It sounds really good. Can I have a read? So she had a read, and she really liked it. And yeah, we got to that quite quickly. It was her preferred one and my first choice of the selection she gave me. So yeah, I love it. And it matters that, they've got to look good. People do judge books by their cover. And even if it's being, scrolled through on a phone for someone to buy a Kindle version or a version from Kobo or a version from iBooks, it's a sign that's smaller than a postage stamp. It has to look great for that too. And so yeah, full tribute to the amazing professional who made Ruby look great. So yeah, it was good. It was nice to collaborate. It was nice to have someone respond visually to the words inside. That was a fun part of the process for me. I really liked that. So, yeah, it was good.
So do we have any questions from the audience? Anybody like to ask Katherine a few more questions?
Is there any connection with New Zealand or
not? New Zealand I was going to mention actually, and I think it's not a spoiler to say that because we talk about being 5 years down the track, so some of the climate change things that we're seeing happening are dialed up a little bit. And one of them is that Perth, unfortunately, which as you know is a place that's already struggling for water, has got to such a water crisis that their population has been shipped to New Zealand, who's in the process of being shipped. So the Australian immigrants are arriving.
Before they get here.
Probably only a reversal anyway.
And there's two New Zealand musicians who are name checked. So Totem Star I mentioned in Kimbra as well gets a flag. So it was nice to be able to bring those. In. It's a nice question. I haven't been asked that before. So that was good.
So any other questions?
A lot of authors agonise over a name and often don't name their character until the end. How did you go about choosing the name Ruby? Is there something?
She's a feisty redhead, so she kind of named herself like quite early, actually. Yeah, she was Ruby in my head for pretty much from the beginning, I think. Yeah, kind of came to be. Thank you.
Great, so she comes out of you.
Yeah, well, it is a really interesting point. It doesn't kind of always happen like that. But I think it's because there's a lot of time when you're not actually writing, when you are thinking about it, either consciously or subconsciously. And so once a character started to take shape, for me anyway, I get to the point where I'm thinking about things through their eyes, because you're trying to build that sort of empathy with them all the time, because your ideal is you want you to kind of, and I certainly hope it's not, if there's references to Ruby that people see parallels for me, I'll kind of take that as a huge compliment, but the other character I hope doesn't alarm me at all either, so you kind of need to be able to live them both, the protagonist and the antagonist, as strongly as you can in your head and your imagination, and then find succinct ways of bringing that through to people. So yeah, it's obviously I'm practicing and hoping it's worked for this, and so far getting good feedback, but I think it's something I'll probably just get better at as a writer, to be able to do.
I don't know whether it's a pun, but is it a teaser, a tea? Or are you able to give away what tea is?
Well, she's a northern girl.
She's a northerner, we drink a lot of tea.
So there's a lot of tea.
There is a reasonably strong amount of tea. There's also a thing at a cultural level which is a little bit more than it just being a quantity of tea. So if in doubt, when the world is falling around by your ears, you put the kettle on, and it's that, there's a whole comfort collective, we'll solve this together, we'll sit down and have a cup of tea, we'll sort it out thing. So it kind of works at a metaphor level for that as well as.
I was wondering about the mention of tea on the cover, because it suggests to me that there's quite a bit of humour in the book. Is that the case?
Thank you. Yeah, it is, and that was one of the reasons I made it, because the tagline was second only in difference to the blurb, which was even harder. Some of the people went through the blurb process with me, Iona, so the tagline was quite tricky, but not as hard as the blurb on the back. But we ended up with a few versions, like people who were supporting with it, one of which didn't have the humour in it, and the tea version, which I wanted because of the humour, because it is part of the book, you know. There is that, the wonderful Carol Bow, who runs the Women's Bookshop, describes Ruby as a really sassy character, and I think that's a great adjective. It's not one I'd thought of to describe her before, but it is. She's got that, you know, that thing going on, and so that sort of northern warmth and humour I wanted to bring into the tagline, because otherwise it all starts to sound a bit, you know, fame, power, sacrifice. It's heading into melodrama territory without the tea to kind of bring it, and I think, I think it does go at least some way to kind of echoing some of that in the book. But there's some pretty full-on British stuff in the book too, you know. It's very much an adult book.
It definitely made me laugh and cry.
Oh.
So,
Thank you. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Don't apologise. It's a good book though that gets you, that captivates you. I think your emotions like that. So I think that's what really I found it just really vibrant, is because it really got me to both ends of my my emotional spectrum.
Thank you. I think that's probably the best compliment any author can wish for. So thank you for that. Really.
I thought that the tedious point was interesting, especially seeing she's got a band. I think I'm sure she was really right inside Ruby's world, right?
Yeah, it was very generous of her, and there's been one of the things about coming down here has been lovely, because Iona Winter, who's an amazing author in her own right, and is a friend of mine, and has been taking part in the Dunedin City of Literature work, who's just spoken up in Edinburgh. So she kindly provided me one of the cover quotes, and of course is Karatani local, and Matilda Ture, who I've known since way before she was an MP, who kindly gave me the other cover quotes. It's been nice to come here and have two local wahine on the back of the book too. It's been a lovely local connection. So.
Is there any more questions?
Is it time for a cup of tea?
Yeah.
Well, I'd just like to say thank you so much. It has been an absolute pleasure meeting you.
Thank you so much for having us,
No, it's
Kay.
been great, and I can't wait to read the book. I think you've just done a fantastic job. It's really important, the thing you've done, because fiction is so powerful in terms of how it changes attitudes. So to do it this way, I think is just a wonderful thing that you've given us, so thank you. And I'd like to thank Dr. Niki Bould for asking some great questions and filling out the background to the book, so thank you both. Michelle will be selling copies of the book if you'd like to buy a copy. It's $39.99, and I'm sure
I'd love to sign them if anyone would like.
Yes, we've got them. Yeah, really.
And do help yourself